Tonight on Mark Latham's Outsiders, how the left-wing diversity agenda and political correctness are starting to put Australian lives at risk. I'm also talking to the great Gavin McInnes from New York and Lehmann here in Sydney about this amazing controversy with Google and the sacking of James Damore. We've got our political panel, Tom Switzer and James Morrow. We've also got Zeg's Cartoons, the Outsiders Outhouse and the Left Lunatic of the Week, a Liberal Party MP who deserves an absolute bagging. It's a great show. Stay tuned. Trigger warning viewers, you've entered a very unsafe space. This is Mark Latham's Outsiders, Australia's most politically incorrect news and current affairs program. I'm coming to you in front of one of the great outsider locations around the country, the Royal Hotel in Queanbeyan, which is on the edge of that infamous insider city, Canberra in the ACT. We love the people in Queanbeyan. Used to have a unit there back in my parliamentary days, love Queanbeyan inside out. What we do here, of course, is give you the facts and the information you don't normally see in the mainstream media. We don't have any political correctness or social engineering agenda or ideology to push. We rely on you to make your own decision about the facts, and we just try and give you the straight talk. The all-important straight talk about things happening around Australia and in the world of international politics. We're in partnership with Rebel Media, so we've got the Mark Latham's Outsiders website. You can see the address there. To sign up for all the Rebel Australia activities and campaigns and videos and information you receive, go to marklathamsoutsiders.com. That's the all-important website. So thanks for watching this evening, where we've got a huge show, particularly talking about this controversy, the closing down of free speech at Google, a threat to us all potentially. Gavin McInnes from New York and Lehmann here from Rebel Australia will be talking about that all-important issue. Plenty of other good stuff, but at the top of the show, let me just outline a major concern about the diversity agenda run by the left in all our institutions. Now, part of this is social engineering. The major part of it is an attempt to wind back the realities of nature. And whether the left like it or not, the truth is in nature, men are more stronger than women, all other things being equal. So if there's a job that relies on physical strength and prowess, if there's a job important for national security where physicality matters, it doesn't really matter if the person's male or female. You want the strongest person to be in the position, and 19 times out of 20, perhaps 99 times out of 100, that will be a man. You need to pick strong people to protect public safety and protect national security. Now, it's not happening. The left have infiltrated all these institutions to the point now, in the New South Wales Fire Brigade, I've had whistleblowers come to me and say this gender equality agenda that they've got, introducing a gender quota for employment, is absolute madness. They've gone to the point in the New South Wales Fire Service where it's a 50-50 employment quota. For every man they employ, they're obliged under the quota to employ a corresponding woman. And they've been watering down the training and safety standards for firefighters in New South Wales to accommodate this employment quota, this gender quota of 50-50 between males and females. And the fellow who introduced it was Greg Mullins, the then Commissioner, in March last year. This is what he had to say. Merit selection will determine the best candidates for the job, regardless of gender, but will deliver equity in the number of male and female firefighters. Well, this is a direct contradiction. It's Orwellian doublespeak. Greg Mullins must expect that the Australian people are really stupid to buy this stuff, because in truth, you can't have merit selection if you've got a predetermined gender quota. It's already 50% men, 50% females. Well, that's not merit selection. That's political ideology, and it's being placed ahead of public safety. We know this for a fact because the way in which they used to test the firefighters with practical tasks to see could they drag one of their colleagues out, a 90-kilo colleague, could he be dragged out of a dangerous situation? The raising of the fire ladder, all important for going into multi-storey buildings to rescue people. These practical tasks have been replaced by simulated tasks that have been watered down specifically to stop women from failing the test. That's the truth of it. And that, of course, no fault of the women involved, but it's a great fault and danger to public safety. Now let's have a look at the first of these processes, the firefighter rescue. This is under their physical aptitude test in the New South Wales Fire Brigade. What they used to have was a 90-kilo drag out. Could you drag a 90-kilo dummy for 20 metres? Let's have a look at what they've replaced it with.
Firefighter rescue. This task simulates rescuing a firefighter from a structural fire. To complete the task, Squat or lunge down, grip the harness straps and move the back plate into a vertical position. Using your legs to lift, stand up while safely lifting the back plate off the ground. Lower yourself below the height marker of 1.55 metres and move backwards for 10 metres, keeping the back plate off the ground. You may stop to adjust your grip, however you must stay under 1.55 metres and ensure that the back plate is off the ground before you continue.
What an absolute joke. What an absolute joke. They've now replaced the 20-metre drag of a 90-kilo dummy with lifting a 30-kilo weight and moving at 10 metres with minimal drag line resistance. And that is obviously not anywhere near the task that's needed. You saw at the start of the video, they were dragging a dummy out of a dangerous situation. Well, why not have that as the real-life test for determining whether or not the firefighter is strong enough to do the job? And the reality is, if you're trapped in a building with smoke inhalation, you need someone to carry you out, you want a big strong man to do the job. If you've got your family trapped in a car accident, you want the best available firefighter to rescue them, not a gender quota. Now, what have they done with the ladder testing? Let's have a look.
Ladder simulation. Firefighting relies on using ladders. This task simulates raising and lowering a 10.5 metre ladder for firefighting and rescue work. To complete the task, position feet shoulder width apart, squat down and with an overhand grip, grasp the bar. Using your legs to lift, raise the bar to navel height. Squat again and move your arms under the bar. Using your legs to initiate the movement, push the bar overhead in one continuous movement until your arms are completely straight.
Now, this is from the Fire and Rescue website. This is the official material they've put out, and you can see the trick. Instead of having a real-life test, could someone lift up the big 49-kilo tall ladder, they go to this sort of gym exercise, an upright row, all designed to allow physically weaker women to pass the test. It's a fast that's threatening lives. It's a fast that's putting public safety at risk. It shouldn't be allowed to stand. The New South Wales Fire Brigade, we need some intervention here by the ministers involved to make sure that the tests are genuine and we have selection on merit to preserve public safety. And unfortunately, this Fire Brigade fast is happening right around Australia. And it's not just in emergency services, this is also happening in terms of the Australian Defence Force. We found out recently Kate Jenkins, a human rights lawyer from the Human Rights Commission, has produced this lengthy, detailed report. Who would have thought a human rights lawyer gets to write 65 recommendations about the training and hiring of fast jet pilots in Australia, our Top Gun type pilots. 62 of the recommendations have been accepted by the Australian Air Force, and one of them is a watering down of the physical requirements of being an effective combat pilot. She's recommending that they're losing too many pilots because of the physical requirements of intensive air-to-air combat training combined with high G-force. The women can't turn their heads. There's a repeated head-turning exercise at G-force. And Jenkins and the Air Force ridiculously has accepted this recommendation, has said modify the testing so it's not as physical. Well, if any pilot, male or female, can't turn their head in a combat situation, it's a major problem. Now, we've seen how this weakens capability and actually threatens lives in the Defence Force. We saw it in the United States in the early 1990s when they too went down the path of diversity agenda, political correctness. The first female carrier-based fighter pilot was Cara Hultgreen. Cara Hultgreen, who died in a tragic accident trying to land on the Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier, in October 1994. And there was some engine failure involved, but also the Independent Centre for Military Readiness has documented how she was rushed through the training process, hadn't passed all the necessary requirements. This was social justice warriors at work rather than military warriors, and ultimately she paid for it with her life. This is what happened. No, that's an absolute tragedy. The young American woman, Cara Hultgreen, lost her life. We don't want the same thing happening in Australia. And the bottom line lesson is fundamentally this. There's no room for diversity agendas, political correctness and left-wing social engineering when it comes to emergency services, public lives at stake, and our defence force defending our nation and our security. No room for those things at all. It must be military warriors ahead of social justice warriors. That's the fundamental truth. Thanks for watching Mark Latham's Outsiders. We'll be back in a short moment with the great Gavin McInnes. Welcome back to the show, and it's my great honour to say we've got one of the superstars of rebel media with us, Gavin McInnes in New York. He's got plenty of fans here down under in Australia, but for those not familiar with his work, a couple of you out there, let's have a look how he introduced one of his recent programs in response to Donald Trump's ban of transgender individuals in the American military. Here's Gavin at work.
Hi guys, I'm a lady. My name is Andrea. They never have a normal name, right? It's always like, I'm Argentia. My name is Sandy, and I'm a lady because I want to be a lady. That's not ridiculous. That's not funny. And I'm going to be in the military, too. I'm going to be in the foxholes. I'm going to be carrying a pack, an 85-pound pack on my back in 150-degree heat next to you. And just, I'm just going to be like, should we go in there? I think there might be a jihadist. I think Omar Khadr might be trying to blow us up. Hey, guys! Let's move it in! Let's move it out! Come on, guys! And then I wake up, I'll be with the other chicks on the Friday night. I'll put on lip. That sounds reasonable, right? No, it doesn't sound reasonable. So no, you can't. If you're this ridiculous, you can't be in the military. I don't think you can be in the military in combat if you have flat feet or shin splints or bad vision. So if you're this weird and unsure about what reality is, no, you can't be in the military. Trump is right.
Gavin McInnes, welcome to Mark Latham's Outsiders.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Absolute pleasure. You've got lots of fans down here, and one of the things they've been wanting to know, how is Trump going with the military transgender ban? Is it World War III there with the lefty snowflakes?
Yes, but they're a very shrill and abrasive minority. So America's happy with it. The military is happy with it. Everyone sane is happy with it. But the Banshee community is outraged, and they can give you a sort of a bad metric and make you think that America is outraged by this idea. But I think we all knew it was reasonable. I mean, this was true before Obama. You weren't allowed to be trans in the military, and you shouldn't have shin splints or flat feet in the military. You shouldn't, in the military, you can't have been on antidepressants within the past 365 days. So if you don't know what gender you are, or you think gender doesn't exist, no, you may not be in the military. It's not an equal opportunity employer.
Hey, is this typical of the whole Trump phenomenon that in the media here we have lots of Trump derangement syndrome, lots of hysteria? I'm sure it's true in the United States. But beneath the surface, in terms of practical things changing for the better and getting done, Trump's actually doing a lot and he's been quite successful. Is that typical?
Almost 1 million jobs. The Dow is at an unprecedented high. But yeah, the left is apoplectic, and they're sort of they're really in another satellite. They're not connected to reality. In fact, every liberal I know, whether they're the executive editor of the New York Times, Jill Abramson, or some Antifa protester, they're all under the impression that Trump is going to be gone within the next few months. And
Yeah,
you think,
yeah.
I don't know how to argue. I don't know how to talk to you now. I mean, that's the same as thinking that New York is going to be underwater in a year. No, he will not be impeached, you buffoons. They really are disconnected from reality.
Yeah, same in the election campaign. I followed it, and every other day they said Trump had imploded, this is the end of Trump, you know, the Khan family, John McCain, he's finished, this is the end of him. But he won the election, and it's just a long extended election campaign where they predict doom and gloom for Trump, but he keeps on pushing through.
You know, we had that with Obama. We didn't want Obama to win. I was sad when he won. And then I saw people dancing in the streets in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where I lived at the time. And they were literally on flagpoles, like on street signs, screaming at the top of their lungs. And I just went, oh, well, all right. Well, we probably have 8 years of this. That's life. And I shrugged. I didn't X any of my friends. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't ostracize anyone. I just went, that ridiculously incompetent guy won because he's black and cool and sexy and women like him, and I'll just wait for 8 years. But these guys, they're different. Liberals in America are still under the impression that Hillary could win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say, one thing I love about Trump, like you, Gavin, I've spent most of my adult life trying to send the left insane, and Trump is the man who's actually doing it. So he's worth supporting for that reason alone. But can I turn to this other big international story about Google and James Damore, who's been punted for writing up a memo about their ideological echo chamber? It seems to me Google's all for diversity, but not diversity of opinion.
Which is what he said. That's what his essay said. He didn't even say women don't belong in tech, which is the way the media is treating it. And if he did say that, I would understand some of this hysteria. But he never said anything like that. He simply said, amongst a million other things, that women might not be equally represented in tech because they're not equally predisposed to that genre of thinking, whatever you want to call it. But he also said within this document much more, which is we need a diversity of opinion. We need to not pillory someone for thinking outside the box. This is the industry we're in. We're in a thinking outside the box business. And he was instantly pilloried for thinking outside the box. And it's just so meta, this whole thing, because Google is about accruing data and applying algorithms to recognize patterns. So this guy has accrued data, he's recognized a pattern, and he was fired for it. So he was fired for doing his job.
And where do you think it's headed? Is he getting a lot of support there? Is there going to be some pushback? Are people worried about what it means for Google's role as owning online material, basically, or owning the traffic, the highway? So where do you think this whole controversy is headed?
That's a great question. I mean, I've been to Google's headquarters here in New York. There was a black and Hispanic man at the front desk where I checked in. And then when I went upstairs, I never saw a black or Hispanic man again. I saw lots and lots of men. I saw a few Asians, a few Indians, mostly white men. And I thought Google probably isn't happy with their own staff, their own inevitability, their own demographics. And I think they keep hiding this. It's like the elephant in the room. And one of the elephants said, "Hello, I'm in the room." And they had an absolute meltdown. And you know, I say this about so many things. Like people say, "Oh, you like Ann Coulter, you're friends with Ann Coulter." How much of what she says is just for shock? And how much of it is sincere? And I say to them, tell me one sentence that she said that is factually incorrect. And to the people pillaring this poor man, I say, what out of his 10-page document was factually incorrect?
Yeah, it's always a great question to ask. You know, I find that the leftist abuse is all about personalities, and they say they're nice and cuddly and soft and compassionate, but they want to rip into everyone for disagreeing, but they never highlight actual errors of fact and research in any of this material. So it's quite remarkable. But is James Damore himself fighting back? Because I would have thought he had an argument under the First Amendment in the United States for free speech. He's been sacked for exercising his free speech in a fashion, as you've pointed out, which doesn't contain any factual inaccuracies.
Yes, but there's an interesting trick here with the First Amendment in America. Australians, Canadians, British people, they're used to getting sued or being fired or getting prosecuted by the government for being racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever, xenophobic. They go, but America's not like that. America has the First Amendment. Yes, technically, on paper, America has the First Amendment. But as far as the culture goes, the people don't want you to have free speech. And if the people don't want something to be so, then the law is not worth the paper it's written on. And the people in America do not want this man to be able to say the facts that are right in front of his face. So we're in the exact same boat everyone else is. And yeah, he'd have a case. He'd have a case if he brought it to the Supreme Court and he had enough money to pay a lawyer $600 an hour and he wanted to ruin his career for the rest of his life. But do you want to do that? I mean, it's a strange culture we live in. We have these Proud Boys up in Halifax that are going to sue the Canadian military for firing them, they'll never work in the military again. That's what it costs to stand up for yourself. And I'm not saying as a Ku Klux Klan grand wizard. I'm not saying as a pedophile. I'm not saying as a rabid anti-Semitic Holocaust denier. I'm saying as a normal human being who wants to discuss facts.
Gavin, I hope James Damore ends up a hero for free speech, and he does a bit better than that forecast that you've given. But can I ask you, in terms of hating political correctness, what's your favourite piece of left-wing madness? Let me tell you mine. There's a thing in Australia they run every December called No Gender December, where parents are urged to ignore the separate girls and boys toys in the department store. And the great irony is the Green senator here who was running this campaign, Larissa Waters, has recently been rubbed out of the Senate because she had Canadian citizenship. You're not allowed to have citizenship of another country. So this silly woman who didn't understand that she had this citizenship, and she's so stupid she's lost her spot in the Senate, is telling us as parents what toys to buy for our kids. No Gender December, absolute madness. What's your favourite piece of lunacy?
I mean, there's so many. I really enjoy the cannibalism of the left. Like, the left has chosen Islam as their bedfellows. And it's almost like a petulant socialite saying, I'm going to date a Hell's Angel, Daddy, and make you mad. And you go, but you're going to get raped at that biker rally. And she goes off anyway, screw you, Dad. And you go, all right, you've definitely angered me, but you've also ruined your life. And we have all these cases in America now where the hijab is seen as a feminist empowerment symbol. And there's a show here in the States that has a lesbian Muslim on it. And she's making out with chicks in every episode. Now, they're doing that basically to anger dads like me. But I go, I'm not really that mad. You realize you just angered your strange bedfellows, right? You're angering your Muslim friends. Or DC Comics has this new Muslim superhero called ISIS. She's literally called ISIS.
I know.
And in every scene, she's scantily clad. Like, you can almost see her genitals. She's got some split skirt and she's punching some guy. She's not wearing a hijab. And that's also angering Muslims. And then we had, I think it was in Britain, I'm not sure, but we had our first gay Muslim wedding where two homosexual men who are Muslim were making out at their wedding, kissing each other, tonguing each other's mouths in the name of tolerance. And I've realized that the left is their own worst enemy. They've actually they're much more effective at thwarting Islam than I am. So all of those cases I'm actually thoroughly enjoying because you got in bed with the strangest bedfellows and now you both have gonorrhea.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, finally, can you tell us about the Proud Boys? We hear a lot about it. You've been very much involved. What is it actually? Ah, beautiful.
It's remarkably benign, just like that diversity memo that the Google tech wrote. If you read it, you will not have a problem with it. The Proud Boys are just a fraternal organization like the Elks Lodge, like the Shriners, like the Knights of Columbus. And it's caused such a hullabaloo because we live in a culture of shame. And for you to want to hang out with other guys of all races, of all sexual preferences, but that also like the West, that like the president, you must be some sort of Nazis. There must be something wrong. And we have people trying to sabotage our meetups. And all we do is meet up and drink beer. And they want to shut that down. Now, we do go to rallies sometimes when our friends are doing a talk, and we will fight back if Antifa attacks us, but that's not what we're about. We don't go picking fights. We're not even like the guardian angels who, wander the subways looking for confrontation. We're just a bunch of guys who like to hang out, but that is a sin in 2017.
And how can Australian men join up? Everyone's got a website these days. What's yours?
Well, we hope that you're tenacious enough to find us, but Proud Boys Australia is very strong. There's Sydney, there's Melbourne. Yeah, they're already thriving, and they're thriving in Britain and Japan, all over the country, all over the world, I should say. And that's not me working through day and night, emailing people saying, go to this meetup. It's just a natural thing because the liberals have created a culture of shame. And when you say, actually, I'm not ashamed, I'm actually pretty proud of my past, it resonates with millions of men.
Well, I better get my Proud Boys membership. Gavin McInnes from New York, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
And in just a moment, we'll come back with Claire Lehmann to talk further about this amazing Google controversy. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders. I touched on this issue of the dreadful Google sacking of James Damore there with Gavin McInnes. And I've been joined now by Claire Lehmann from Rebel Australia, who's had a fascinating experience with this matter. Because as we know, James Damore has been sacked for expressing his point of view about the Google workplace and diversity issues, unconscious bias, critique and the like. And basically, he was putting forward the common sense proposition that men and women are different characteristics and capabilities, and that's reflected in workplace performance. Now, who could disagree with that? Well, Claire, to her credit, put up on her very popular Quillette website a confirmation of the Damore position from 4 very prominent behavioural scientists, experts in their field internationally. And Claire, it's great to have you here. Can you take up the story? What happened after you put up these 4 opinions from the behavioural scientists, professors and the like?
Well, immediately the piece was getting high amounts of traffic, but not long after it was published, my website crashed. I assumed that was because there was so much traffic the servers couldn't handle it, but then when an engineer went and had a look, it turned out that I had a denial of service attack. We don't know where that has come from.
That's similar to the Australian census last year, why it went down.
Yeah, so the website has been taken down by hackers.
And the 4 academics, you published their opinion, they're basically saying in the James Damore memo, there was nothing inaccurate, nothing factually
exactly
incorrect.
Right. Yeah.
So what sort of points were they making, the 4 of them?
So James Damore wrote a 10-page memo, and what he was essentially saying is that group differences between men and women are meaningful, and it's unrealistic to expect a 50-50 parity in a company such as Google, which is focused on technology and coding, because the main sex difference that is relevant in the Google situation is that very overwhelmingly women are interested in working with people, whereas men have more of a predilection to working with systems.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not mean that no women are good at coding or working in systems. It just means that there are more men who have those interests. And so he was basically making the point that it's unrealistic to expect 50-50.
Yeah, well, that's a
Google.
valid point. Here's a picture of James Damore and the headline associated with his sacking. He's a guy who's made the common sense point, you can't expect 50-50 in every single workplace. And we're not expecting 50-50 in the law, where you've got now majority female representation in Australia, or GP doctors, or federal public servants, or teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, overwhelmingly, your average teacher in Australia is a woman. And no one's saying, oh, we need a male 50-50 quota to restore the balance. So why would we be doing it in these other industries, companies in the tech sector like Google?
That's right. 80% of veterinary scientists are women, 75% of psychologists are women. And so it's not that women aren't interested in science, but they go into different scientific areas. They go into psychology, they go into vet science, they go into medicine. And we know that psychologists have been studying this for a long time. So these policies that these companies have been implementing ignore all of the empirical evidence that has been built up over decades. And so what James was doing in his memo, he was just pulling together this evidence that is readily available to anyone who knows how to do any kind of research. He just pulled it together, made it applicable to the Google workplace, and circulated it within his workplace, and he was sacked. I mean, it's really scary, because all he did was cite some well-established, non-controversial mainstream psychology research.
Yeah, no, and he's been verified by these academics that you've put up there, and just as scary, your site has been hacked down.
Yeah.
Can we work out who did it, and how long does it take to get it back up?
Well, I've got someone working on it at the moment, and I've asked people to sort of help out, and I've actually had a lot of support flooding in from Silicon Valley. You know, a lot of people wanting to stay anonymous. So it's quite a remarkable event. I don't know if we'll ever find out who has hacked it. I guess they're called social justice warriors for a reason.
Yeah, that's a pretty good guess. Now, can we get the information up on my website, Mark Latham's Outsiders, and also Rebel Media platforms, because people really need to have a good look at what Claire has put forward there. I was very struck by one of the opinions from Professor Jeff Miller, who made this very important argument. He said, well, the left run two contradictory stances, really. On one hand, they say that people are all the same, there's no need for discrimination. If there's more men than women in a workplace, it must be because of sexism and bigotry in the employment practices. And Miller points out, well, if that's true, people are all the same, it negates totally the business case for diversity.
Yeah.
If everyone's the same, well, there's no need for special employment policies because you get the same in terms of workplace capability.
Yeah.
But then Miller goes on to say the second leftist argument is that everyone's different, there's all this diversity out there, and your company will be weaker unless you hire in a whole range of diverse people. You need to, you know, draw from the rich tapestry of human experience and capability. But if that's true, and people are so different, then naturally people will be better suited to some kinds of jobs and others won't be suited. So again, it negates the leftist argument. Miller's made a really important point, hasn't he?
Absolutely, and he exposes the lie that's at the heart of this. And the lie is that these companies are implementing these diversity policies to avoid lawsuits. They're doing it to avoid gender discrimination lawsuits. So the lie is that diversity is required to improve the productivity and the output, the profit margins. But that's not true, and that the real reason they're doing it is for insurance reasons, so they don't get sued. I mean, that might be a legitimate reason to implement a policy, but these companies are not being honest about that.
No, they're not, and Claire, credit to you for putting up the defence of James Damore so effectively that you've been hacked down. The original material went viral, didn't it? So we want as many people as possible to see those academic opinions, to defend this young man's free speech, putting forward sensible, evidence-based opinions. So we'll get that material up, and thanks for joining us, Claire. And after a short break, we'll be coming back with Zeg and all our material from the Outhouse and the ever-popular Left Lunatic of the Week. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders, here in front of the magnificent Royal Hotel in Queanbeyan, New South Wales. I want you to remember our website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. You can go there to register and get all the Rebel Australia activities. It's there on the screen, marklathamsoutsiders.com. And now we've got one of our favourite moments in the calendar of Mark Latham's Outsiders in this program, and that's to welcome Super Zeg, the cartoonist. You've got the great symbol there, mate. Super Zeg.
Yeah, or S for sanity. Sanity, because democracy has returned. We're getting a plebiscite, mate.
Well, speaking of democracy, you and I were at a conference last week with Vote Australia. They're trying to clean up all the rorts, all the bodgy independent candidates, the double voting, the bussing in of Labor Party, Liberal Party voters to rort these marginal seats. And it was a great conference. We want to promote the idea of Vote Australia, and their website is at www.afhe, used to stand for Australians for Honest Elections.org.au. You can see it on the screen there, and Lex Stewart in particular is doing a great job. Isn't that right,
Fantastic. He's fantastic. The people there at Vote Australia are trying to do what no government's been able to do, and actually return our electoral system to the democratic, fair and honest system that it should always have been.
Now, as our cartoon in residence, of course, you've got a cartoon reflection on this that we can have a look at. Talk us through this, Zeg.
Right. Yeah, this is
what have you got here? There we go.
Well, there we go. We're at the public school where most of us will find ourselves on polling day, and there's old matey saying, so who are you voting as? Not who you're voting for, who you're voting as. And he's flipping through the phone book there. Give me a minute.
Yeah, plenty of rorts in the system, so we've got to support Vote Australia and their work to clean out and clean up the system.
Yes.
And other news we've had, Zeg, is this disgraceful decision in the eastern suburbs of Sydney to knock back a synagogue in Bondi for the reason that it might be a terrorist target. This is caving into radical Islam, isn't it?
This is what the tactic of terrorism is about, Mark. I mean, this is what they want us to do. They want us to stop living our lives as we always have. So what's it going to be? Because they don't like the look of our women on the beach, let's get them off the beach, because what's going to happen?
Well,
They're going to attack
cartoon.
them.
That's your cartoon. It's a great cartoon. Let's have a look at it. It's coming up
There
there
it is.
exactly.
Bondi Beach 2017. By order of the council, bikini-clad females and infidel males, that's you and me, provoke Islamic terrorism. Thus, in the interest of public safety, leave the beach now.
Yeah, well, Bondi Beach could be a target of terrorists. They're going to close down the beach just as they've knocked back the synagogue. It's crazy.
It's
The
mental.
other big issue in the news this week is the Turnbull government deciding to go with the postal plebiscite for same-sex marriage, and you've got a take on that. Another great cartoon.
Well, here
What's
we
Malcolm
are.
doing there, Zach?
There he is. He's on his knees. He's in the middle of Paddington, which is in the seat of Wentworth, his division. And yeah, he's saying, please, my people, forgive me. Democracy and the ALP is to blame. You know, and you can hear the shouts, you know, a plebiscite, no. He was supposed to vote for me. You'd be nothing, Mao, without us, traitor. And yeah, someone's just not impressed with the fact that he has lost his shirt. But that's what it's all about, isn't it? He's pandering to the left. And
well, he is. He's trapped. He's trapped between his party and his own beliefs. But the interesting thing with the plebiscite will be to see how many people actually return their postal vote. It's a return to voluntary voting in Australia, and the turnout will pretty well determine the result. So it's all very, very unpredictable, but it's a form of democracy, and we'll have to see how it unfolds. Now, another form of democracy is your views coming in, the feedback we get here on Mark Latham's Outsiders. We call it the Outsiders Outhouse. Zeg has got the cartoon with me on the Thunderbox. The Outhouse, the last place in Australia these days, seemingly, where you've got freedom of thought and expression and what you're doing. And you can send in your views about the issues of the day or comments about the program. We get plenty of correspondence to mark.latham@therebel.media. mark.latham@therebel.media. So we look forward to your feedback, and we've had some wonderful stuff come in for tonight's show, starting with Jeremiah from Kempsey, New South Wales. This is an inspirational account. He writes as follows, Jeremiah. I'm a 17-year-old Aboriginal Australian with right-wing ideologies, and I'm always being condemned by my friends, family and others in the Indigenous community for my opinions. Also, the fact that I'm a Donald Trump supporter makes things worse. Well, good on you, Jeremiah. Stand up for your opinions. He goes on to write, I always incur a lot of hatred from the black community because I don't support the Black Lives Matters movement. I'm strongly against the abolition of Australia Day, and I always speak the truth when it comes to the problems within Indigenous communities. I've been called a traitor, a racist, and even a white supremacist. Yes, really, a white supremacist. Because of all that, I've been too scared to come out as a conservative. However, watching your show has given me the confidence to be who I am and to express my opinions, views and beliefs without fear of condemnation. Well, I say, Jeremiah, that's a great wrap for our show. The fact, Zeg, that we're encouraging people to express their views. I would say to Jeremiah, as I say to young people in my own household and those I know in my community, never be afraid of being in a minority of one. Stand by your principles, stand by your beliefs, and even if you're in the minority of one, you may well find years down the track, even decades if it takes that long, you can be justified, and the overwhelming majority had it wrong in the substance of the issue. So Jeremiah, that's inspirational stuff, and thanks for your views. Now, earlier in the show I mentioned the way in which the diversity agenda is reducing defence capability. We've got a real problem here when they're employing quotas for the determination of military personnel. And Gareth, a serving member of the Australian Defence Force, Gareth has written in as follows. Please keep going, Mark. We need a voice like yours. Thanks very much, Gareth. Can I please say something about gender equity in the ADF? 40 females are coming through the School of Infantry in Singleton as infantry soldiers. Only a handful of them have been forced through the rigorous training program. The attrition rates for females here is about 90% due to injuries sustained, as well as the females getting into the second or third week and pulling out of the program. The handful who have been forced through the training schedule, I think he means by that they've been pushed through against merit, they've by no means attained their status as an infantry soldier by hard work or merit. Conversely, the staff who train these kids have been ordered to ensure that females graduate even though they're not ready or properly qualified. The staff have complained and tried to back squad these females, but the brass have ordered them to ensure the females pass through the course in order to maintain cultural diversity, so-called. The combat Barbie experience is not going well. Well, I'm sure that's true, Gareth, because the bottom line in life, and indeed our country, should always be merit prevails. When we're talking about national security, when we're talking about public safety, there's no room for political correctness, no room for this crazy left-wing diversity agenda. We must put the public interest first. Yes. And Gareth, your note there corresponds with what so many people in the military are saying, that the diversity agenda is reducing capability and actually putting our nation at risk.
Mark, I was a soldier. I had to go through the training to become an infantryman. All I had to do was have gender reassignment surgery and I would have got let off.
You would have got in on the quota. And finally, concerning one of our major problems in the country, left-wing bias at the ABC, we've got Peter Burrows writing in as follows: we have to deal with this left-wing behemoth, the ABC. The damage caused by the misinformation, bullshit and social engineering they broadcast is extensive. It does not reflect real life. It supports fringe, freak shows and minorities. And here's Peter's suggestion: put it behind a paywall and let those who want to watch it do so. I object to paying for this crap. Well, good on you, Peter. Many people do object, and that's not a bad idea. If you want to watch it, pay for it.
Ditto. Why not? Let the market decide. It's how everything in this country works. You want it, you pay for it. Why should you and I, or any other taxpayer out there, be paying for content and propaganda that we really just, why? Well, why do we?
Well,
it's
just
wrong.
Rubbish. And in the competitive media environment, the ABC is getting a free kick at our cost.
But it's been going
at the
on
cost
for
of
too
the
long,
Australian
Mark.
taxpayer. But Zeg, not surprisingly, our left lunatic of the week has bobbed up on the ABC.
Yep.
Let's have a look at the cartoon you've drawn for this guy. It's Warren Entsch, the Liberal Party member for Leichhardt. I wouldn't imagine in North Queensland there same-sex marriage is much of an issue. But for Entsch there, with his very colourful rainbow tie, it's an absolute personal obsession. He's surrounded by all the other lefty lunatics we've honoured over the week, Zeg. You've got Van Batten eating the donuts. You've got Triggs there, Timmy Soutphomma's son, Clementine Ford, the top right-hand side with her favourite item of male anatomy dangling away. And of course, in the background, people have been asking, who's that guy in the red bandana, saying, pick me, pick me. Well, of course, he'll probably come around eventually, Peter Fitzsimons. But the left lunatic for this week is Warren Entsch. Here's how he appeared on the ABC 7:30 report on Monday night.
Well, look, I mean, we continue our advocacy. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we hoped for a free vote that came out of this, and unfortunately, I mean, understand that 4 of us went into this. 5 of us, sorry. We got 7 now on side that are arguing this, and we've got a commitment to re-put the plebiscite this week, which I think is fantastic. Now, I sort of reflect back when I started advocacy for issues within the gay community back in 2004, 2005. I was the only person on both sides of the parliament that stood up and raised a concern about some of the inadequacies, if you like, the unfairness, the discrimination.
Well, 2 things about Warren Entsch, why he's won this award, the left lunatic of the week. 1, he's boasting about the fact he had 7 votes in the Liberal Party room on Monday. He was humiliated by the fact he only had 7 votes for his proposition, a free vote in the Parliament, in a party room of over 80. So he looked like an absolute goose for that reason. He's turned the Liberal Party upside down for a fringe issue with a fringe number of supporters. And the second thing about him, he was saying that he was doing a lot on this issue, basically the only one in the Parliament in 2004. Well, Warren Entsch, I was in the Parliament in 2004, and you had people like Penny Wong, Duncan Kerr, Plibersek, Albanese. They were all fighting tooth and nail for these gay issues, as you'd expect, the inner city left. So you're delusional about your own role, you're delusional about your own level of support, and you may well find at the end of the day you're delusional as to how many Australians actually support his point of view. Warren Entsch, what an absolute fool.
Oh, look, good to give him the gong this week.
He deserved it. Thanks for watching. After this break, we'll be back with our wonderful political panel this evening, Tom Switzer and James Morrow. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders. Huge foreign policy issues dominating the agenda. So I'm delighted to say we've got our crack foreign policy panel in. James Morrow from the Daily Telegraph, thank you.
Great to be
and
here.
Tom Switzer.
G'day, Mark. Great to be back.
We let you in even though you're from the ABC in Fairfax.
Well, I feel very much at home here.
Good on you, Tom. Now, what's happening with North Korea? We've got the news today that perhaps the regime there has developed a miniaturised nuclear warhead capacity, and Donald Trump has said, in great Trump style, he will meet these North Korean threats with fire and fury like the world has never seen. James?
Well, that's right, he has, but this is really the end point of a process that's been going on for, at least since the early 90s, and we've been kicking the can down the road, successive American administrations, trying to give them aid, assistance with their peaceful nuclear programs, and a whole number of other things, and you get to the end of this road and you find that there's a cliff, and that's where we are right now. So you've got an existential threat here now from North Korea. They are threatening to do something against Guam or the west coast of the United States. Who knows if they can actually carry that off, but I think we're really coming to that crunch point now where something needs to be done against the North Korean regime, because you can't have this guy running around with ever-increasing missile capabilities, which eventually one day he will actually be able to do something with and then hold the world to ransom.
Well, Tom, you've been saying that Kim Jong-un is much more than a totalitarian fruitcake, which is the way he's portrayed in the media. He's much more strategic. Do you still hold to that opinion?
Yeah, I do. I think that the threat that Pyongyang poses is very real, and especially if it has access to an intercontinental ballistic missile that can hit Darwin or Los Angeles, it should be taken exceedingly seriously. But I still believe the threat can be contained and deterred the way it had been for many years. And I think that from his perspective, he's looked at the downfall of Gaddafi in Libya in 2011. Gaddafi did a deal with Tony Blair and Condi Rice after 2003 and decided to dismantle his nuclear weapons program. Kim's looked at this and seen that within a few years, the Americans and the British and the French decided to take preemptive action to take him out. He doesn't want to meet that fate. So he feels that a nuclear program is the best way to deter threats. So my view is that containment can work. Containment and deterrence can't work against terrorists and jihadists who can run and hide, but rogue states have a mailing address, and I suspect that Kim is calculating enough and smart enough to recognise that if he ever used WMD against America or America's interests in the region, it would guarantee massive retaliation, perhaps annihilation.
Well, that's correct. And I mean, that's what Bill Clinton said back in 1993 as well. You go back and I was looking at what he said in 1993, the country would cease to exist in any sort of substantive fashion. So with Gaddafi, that's an interesting analogy, because Gaddafi was, I think, one of the salutary effects of the Gulf War was that he did see what happened to Saddam Hussein, and he said, you know what, I'm going to get in a box here, and I'm going to be contained, and I'm not going to cause any trouble. And the problem we then had, I think, was the Obama administration then let Gaddafi go, and the Clinton State Department let these, IS or Muslim Brotherhood or whoever rebels go and topple Gaddafi. So unfortunately, that removes some of the credibility of the Gaddafi option of just saying, I will sit here in my box and I will not do anything. And the thing is, we don't know anything really about what is motivating this regime. We can try and put a frame that says these are rational actors with the same sort of rational goals, but it's so hermetically sealed, and some of the things they do are so completely crazy, like killing that diplomat in the the brother in the Malaysian airport, and all of these things. It's very hard to ascribe a set of rational motives that we can deal with. So that's what makes me a little less optimistic about the idea that we can contain this threat.
Containment has weaknesses. I readily concede that. But what's the alternative? I mean, a preemptive strike is surely fraught with the danger of unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. And that's the problem. And that's where we are now, is that you can't do it on a preemptive strike without putting Seoul and Tokyo at very serious risk. And that, the historical lesson is one that's an ancient one about the dangers of letting these problems fester and fester and fester, because, as I said before, you get to the end of the road and you wind up at a cliff.
Well, on other matters relating to Donald Trump, you've been active in the Fairfax press, Tom, earlier in the week, with a headline in the Sydney Morning Herald, a very good column, but the headline read, Trump may signal end to American exceptionalism. But it's a more detailed story.
Yeah, I wasn't happy with that headline. Clearly the argument was that the decline of American prestige and credibility that all the commentators are saying have happened over the last 6 months. My argument is that preceded Trump, and in many respects, Trump is a symptom of American decline, not the cause of it. I mean, you go back, have we forgotten the invasion of Iraq, by the neoconservatives like John McCain, and the liberal interventionists like Hillary Clinton strongly supported. I mean, the war in Iraq clearly destabilised the Middle East. It created a bunch of Sunni jihadists, even more fanatical than Al-Qaeda, that was responsible for 9/11. Libya, as we just discussed, Afghanistan. America's made many mistakes in the Middle East. There was a financial crisis that created all these anxious electorates that voted for Trump. So in many respects, Trump represents a backlash against the establishment that's primarily responsible for the decline of American
But
prestige
Tom,
and credibility.
Is this a bad thing? Because in other places you've argued for non-interventionist American foreign policy to normalise their stance. They go back to being a normal nation that doesn't interfere, doesn't go invading, doesn't have foreign adventurism through land wars. So is it such a terrible thing that the United States would be more normal in its foreign
No,
policy?
I think America still has a lot of vast power, but it should use that vast power with greater discrimination and selectivity. And don't know what Trump stands for, though. I think he's just a bit of an erratic character. I mean, if indeed he goes through with a preemptive strike, I don't think that's consistent with the ideas and the worldview that helped him get elected. I think Trump's instincts on foreign policy, especially on Russia and the Middle East, all things considered, are pretty sound. But he's just an erratic character, and he does have the tendency to be a bit of a loose cannon.
James, is the United States in long-term decline?
Well, look, I mean, this is, the theories that have gone on forever that, empires rise and then empires fall. But I do think Tom is absolutely correct. There is sort of that original sin around the Iraq War and that kind of attempt, you could say, to rewrite the Sykes-Picot Treaty after World War I and the whole map of the Middle East. But the whole Obama administration really, I think, was an entire exercise in limiting and declining American prestige and power around the world. And so all sorts of very strange things happened there, including the arming and the sending of pallet loads of cash to the Iranian regime, which could very well be another North Korea down the road when they develop their own nuclear technology. And the reducing of American power and prestige around the world. So people voting for Trump was very much, I think, a reaction against that, as much as foreign policy played into the election. They didn't want to see more of the same kind of, well, we will intervene kind of fecklessly, but without any sort of clarifying purpose. Post-Cold War, we lost a sort of clarifying purpose to what interventions would be worthwhile and rational. And so without that sort of clarifying agenda, you don't, your power winds up being diffuse and goes to strange things that don't really necessarily have any purpose.
Now, elsewhere, James, you're quite a student of strategic change in the Middle East. And one of the things about Middle Eastern politics, we all sort of think it's a dog's breakfast. We note the day-to-day news and events that happen. But is there a realignment going on in terms of Qatar, what's happening with Qatar, and also the emergence of what you call a stability camp? Can you explain it for
Well,
us?
I think this is a really interesting thing that's happening right now, and you got to look at the last 6 months of Trump, I think, has helped to push this along, not just in the fact that increased American military activity has helped really lead to the diffusion of ISIS in Mosul and Raqqa, which are both almost sort of
big developments, yeah.
But more to the point, though, all those traditional things that we used to think about, Arab versus Jew, Sunni versus Shiite, all of these things are realigning themselves right now. So to make it very quick, Trump goes to Saudi. Suddenly the Saudis cut off Qatar. Qatar had been funding the Muslim Brotherhood and Al Jazeera through its vast oil wealth and gas wealth. They get pushed into this sort of Iranian thing and isolated. But meanwhile, you see all these funny things happening. You see Saudi Arabia cooperating with Egypt and cooperating even with Israel because they realize that that this bigger threat is coming from Iran. And you see the Israelis cooperating with Palestinian security forces against terrorism in Israel. And then you see Iran more and more isolated and the Muslim Brotherhood pushing their own barrow. There's a funny realignment now where the old things where we'd say, well, the Sunnis in Qatar would never get together with the Shiites in Iran because their mortal enemies hate each other, with that the Saudis and the Israelis would never play footsie under the table because, Arab and Jew. That's starting to happen. And now the whole way we look at the Middle East, that whole Eastern Mediterranean region is starting to shift. And that, I think, has really profound implications for the way the United States handles these things and also just what we in Australia see and how we deal with these issues as well.
Yeah, see, I'd quote James Baker, the US Secretary of State in the first Bush administration during the Yugoslavian Civil War. We don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, let's think about it. The United States, Israel, London are strongly supporting our friends, the Saudis, and the Sunni Gulf Coalition, minus Qatar. And these guys, it's quite clear, have exported Wahhabism. They've aided and abetted a lot of these Sunni jihadists that have morphed into Islamic State jihadists. 15 out of the 19 of the terrorists on 9/11 were Saudi nationals. So we're doing deals with the Saudis to fight the Iranian-backed Shia militia, who are also despicable characters. So why are we involved in this morally ambiguous conflict?
Well, that's the perpetual question in the Middle East. Absolutely, but
it
I
is
would have
fascinating, though.
It
That
is
whole
fascinating,
shift.
but
It
I
is.
would have thought this
Especially
is
Israel's role.
This is
Correct.
for me. This is the most prominent weakness of Trump's presidency so far. He hasn't done more about the exporting of Wahhabi influence around the world. It's a disappointment. But we've run out of time.
That's fine.
We love having our experts here on foreign policy because these are two of the best. Thanks, Tom and James, for
Great
being
pleasure,
here
Mark.
this evening.
Always a pleasure.
And thanks to the viewers for watching. We'll be back with Mark Latham's Outsiders same time next Wednesday night. Thanks again.